Chapter 292. Treat 1. After she was done, she ate one. She then started to busy herself with other things, especially the various dried fruits in the mountains. The fruits were nearly half ripe, so she had to pick them up and store them in the warehouse quickly. The next day, Jiyu Chungrui didn't go straight to his clinic. Instead, he brought 2 pounds of chestnut cake, 2 pounds of dried wolf meat, and 2 pounds of dried beef. The couple then went to the manor together. Zhu Huaiming, who was drinking a gruel made of white sweet potato vines with a disdainful look, saw them coming as his eyes lit up. He approached them and said, "Brother Jiyu, you're here. Have you eaten? If you haven't, do you want to eat together?" "TVE eaten. I'm just here to visit. Please hurry and eat your breakfast," Jiyu Chungrui replied. However, Zhu Huaiming didn't go back. Instead, he stared at the paper bag in his hand. Jiyu Chungrui smiled and handed it to him. "This gift for you and Uncle Liu is for the 15th day of the 8th lunar month. It's a little shabby, so please don't mind it." "How could that be? It's good enough to have meat to eat this year." Zhu Huaiming smiled as he took it and placed it on the table. After that, he found the beef jerky and took a bite. "It's easy if you want meat. There are plenty of cattle and sheep in this village. If you want to eat them, you can pick one for slaughter any time," Jiyu Chungrui replied. "Really? I'll have to pick up some cows during the festival later. As for the price, I'll pay 20 taels of silver per cow." "Oh right, there are also sheep. How about 5 taels of silver per head?" "There's no need, don't refuse. We're brothers, but we should settle our accounts clearly. It's good enough that you're letting me eat your livestock." "All right, but tonight I'll treat you. How about we eat some lamb skewers?" "Sure, I've been craving it for a long time, but I'm just too embarrassed to say it." Zhu Huaiming laughed. "Oh right, I have wine here, you don't need to bring them," he added. "All right, you can pick a sheep or 2 this afternoon. I'll come back early." Jiyu Chungrui turned around and left. Zhu Ying didn't want to run back and forth, so she stayed behind. After exchanging a few polite words with Zhu Huaiming and Manager Liu, she turned around and went to the livestock shed. Although cattle and sheep breeding was restrained as much as possible because of the lack of grass, many little ones were still being born. Lastly, she went to the grassland to look at the white sweet potatoes. She found Uncle Nyan, who was harvesting the white sweet potato vines, and asked, "Uncle Nyan, do you think these white sweet potato vines can guarantee the cattle's and sheep's survival until next spring?" "It's hard to say. The problem is that we need wheat bran as the core ingredient. Otherwise, I'm afraid these aren't enough for them to eat." "How much wheat bran and soybeans do we have in the warehouse?" "They should be able to last until the end of the year." "You're sure good at being frugal." "I had no choice. I saw something wasn't right, so I reduced the feed amount in early summer." "All right, I'll try my best to get more white potato vines from the village. Also, try not to let them breed, or else we really can't afford to raise them." "I understand. It's not the time for a last resort, so I wouldn't let them breed." "Oh, where's the water source? Is there enough water here?" "The well at the foot of the mountain is enough," Uncle Nyan said. "I heard that the water level of the well in the village has started to drop." At this point, the old man looked up at the huge sun and continued with a pained expression, "If this continues, I don't know if the cattle and sheep can be raised. If there's a chance, please sell some out." "All right, I'll remember this." Zhu Ying nodded and told him about the lamb slaughter in the afternoon. However, she didn't say 2, but 5. The festival was coming soon, so she had to give some welfare to the other people living in the manor. After the sheep were slaughtered in the afternoon, Jiyu Chungrui returned with the restaurant's oven and iron skewers. After that, Zhu Ying directed everyone to start skewering the meat. She cleaned up the mutton giblets from the 2 lambs and made a big pot of mutton soup. She also added some vermicelli, tofu skin, and dried radish. Chapter 293. Treat 2. The rich aroma of the mutton giblet soup drew in all the residents of the manor. Zhu Ying wasn't stingy. She gave each family a large bowl, including the people that Manager Liu and the others brought. She then gave Chen Zhuang and the other long-term workers a bowl each. There wasn't much left, but it was enough for each of them to have a bowl. After the skewers started cooking, Ju Ying asked someone to bring Chang Shun and Uncle Nyan over. They sat together to roast the mutton. Of course, after it was cooked, she gave 5 skewers to each long-term worker. When they were almost done eating, Ju Huaiming rubbed his stomach and said, "This is the most filling meal I've had in the past 6 months. I'm certainly not used to it." "No way, you don't have enough to eat in the military camp?" Jiyu Chungrue asked in surprise. In his opinion, although the food in the military camp during this bad year wasn't good, it wasn't to the extent of being unable to eat enough. Ju Huaiming nodded. "It's always half full, just enough to make sure I can lift my sword." Jiyu Chungrue nodded his head in understanding, and he didn't know what to say for a moment. Ju Ying quickly thought of the cattle and sheep the village could not afford to raise and asked, "Does the military camp accept cattle and sheep?" Ju Huaiming's eyes lit up. "Of course, it'll take as much as you have. But are you sure you want to sell it? It isn't worth the round trip if it's just a small amount. I'm selling them. I'm afraid my restaurant won't be able to open for a while. The problem is that if they continue to reproduce, I won't be able to afford to raise them. How much can you sell it for now?" Ju Ying didn't reply but looked at Uncle Nyan. The older man was stunned for a moment. After he understood what Ju Ying wanted, he quickly chewed the meat in his mouth a few times and swallowed it, then said, "General Ju, we can spare about 200 cows and 1,000 sheep. We should be able to produce 100 cows and 500 sheep from our farm, too," Manager Liu replied. "Good, great. The camp will have no problem holding on with the addition of these cows and sheep until the new year." Ju Huaiming nodded. "But they're all living beings," he worriedly added. "I'm afraid it won't be easy to ship them. It's the same as human traffickers transporting people. Other than when they need to eat, well, just drug them all the time." Jiyu Chungrue replied. Ju Huaiming shook his head. "There are too many refugees now. The road isn't safe." After thinking for a moment, he said, "How about this? Give me 3 days. 3 days later, you'll hand over the cattle and sheep, and we'll pass you the money. We'll pay the price we agreed on before." "All right, then we'll talk about it in 3 days." Ju Ying nodded. After Ju Huaiming finished speaking, he looked at Chang Shun, who was sitting to the side, and asked, "Chang Shun, right? How many people in the manor know how to plant white sweet potatoes from the beginning to the end?" Chang Shun paused for a moment before he hurriedly sat up straight to reply, "General Ju, most of the elderly in the manor know, and there are about 10 of us." "That's great. Inform them that they should come with me on a long trip after the white sweet potatoes are harvested in a month," General Ju stated. "You mean we are planting the sweet potatoes in the south?" Jiyu Chungrue asked. "That's right. Now, the entire Ming dynasty is short of food, so we must plant them as soon as possible. Otherwise, the people will starve and might do something terrible. It's best to find sandy soil with a water source nearby. Also, there are many kinds of insects in the south, so the land must be deeply plowed, and the people must be prepared to kill the insects. Otherwise, the white sweet potatoes will all be eaten by insects." Ju Ying reminded him. "So troublesome?" "It's not too much trouble. I think the old local farmers will definitely know. You can ask the local people when the time comes." "That's true. Every place has its own climate. We do have to pay attention to this." Ju Huaiming nodded in agreement, then asked curiously, "Then why did you suggest choosing a place with sandy soil?" Chapter 294 Harvesting white potatoes. White potatoes grow underground, and sandy soil means loose ground. The ventilation is good, so it's easy for water to circulate. There is also a large temperature difference in sandy soil, so many pests would not survive. Ju Ying replied, "I really didn't know you were this knowledgeable at farming. I've heard about it from the old farmers. You can liken white sweet potatoes to peanuts. Peanuts are also suitable to plant in sandy soil." "I see." Ju Huaiming nodded thoughtfully. After chatting for a while, Ju Ying and her husband went home. Because the second courtyard was full of men, Ju Ying was really uncomfortable living there alone. At night, Jiyu Chungrue butchered a sheep in the interspace. After splitting it up, He sent out the gifts to each family the following day. In the blink of an eye, another month had passed. As the weather gradually turned colder and the water consumption decreased, the water level in the wells finally stabilized. Meanwhile, the people started to harvest their sweet potatoes. Ju Ying's family was the first to harvest sweet potatoes. While harvesting them, she also called a strong laborer from each family to come over and learn. After all, harvesting sweet potatoes was a technical job. If they weren't careful, they would damage them. The people were learning from the side and naturally felt embarrassed just watching, so they began working, and most potatoes were collected in less than an hour. Ju Ying looked at the small mountain of white potatoes and smiled with satisfaction. With these white potatoes as a cover, their future life wouldn't be difficult. After that, she said to everyone, "Everyone, do you understand now? If you do, then hurry up and go back to harvest your potatoes. Remember to pick out the broken pieces, wash them, cut them into pieces, or dry them. Otherwise, they won't be able to preserve it for a long time. Thank you. This isn't a difficult task. Everyone, go back and harvest the sweet potatoes." The patriarch said. "Wait, if anyone doesn't want the sweet potato vines, you can sell them to me. 1 acre of sweet potato vines for 1 tael of silver." Ju Ying said. The crowd murmured in surprise, but no one affirmed her. After all, it was an unknown year ahead. They were thinking of drying it and grinding it into grass noodles to eat with the white potatoes. Seeing this, the patriarch felt a little embarrassed. He quickly opened his mouth and said, "All right, go and do your work. Remember, if you don't want the white potato vines at home, you can sell them to Ju Ying." After the crowd left, second uncle Ji Yu, who stayed behind, walked to Ju Ying and said, "Ju Ying, are you crazy? You don't need that much food. Why are you still buying the white potato vines at such a high price? There's no other way. There's still a herd of cattle and sheep waiting to be eaten in the village. However, from the looks of it, even at such a high price, I'm afraid we won't be able to buy a lot." Second uncle Ji Yu was stunned for a moment. He knew that he had misunderstood her and was a little embarrassed. When he thought about everyone's reaction, he didn't know what to say. He hesitated momentarily and said, "We have a total of 15 acres of sweet potatoes. I'll give you 10 acres of sweet potato vines for free." Ju Ying looked at him in surprise and said, "Thank you, second uncle, but you should go back and discuss it." Second uncle Ji Yu was just about to say that he could make the decision, but when he thought of Mrs. Liu and his wife's character, he swallowed the words that were on the tip of his tongue. But when he thought of the help the couple had given the old mansion, he finally patted his chest and said, "Don't worry, leave this matter to me." "All right, thank you. But don't make things difficult for yourself. It's fine if you don't have any. We're family, no need to be so polite." Second uncle Ji Yu turned around and left after he finished speaking. As soon as he left, an ordinary carriage stopped at the door. Ju Ying was surprised and walked over. Before she could speak, she saw Ju Huaiming walking in with half a sheep's worth of meat. Manager Liu then turned around and walked to the front of the carriage. After that, he respectfully drew the curtain and waited in place. Chapter 295. The Third Prince. After a while, a man who was about the same age as Ju Huaiming walked out. The man was dressed in a black brocade robe with silver trimmings. He looked exceptionally tall and steady despite his young age. Unfortunately, his handsome face, which seemed to have been cut by a knife, looked particularly cold. It gave people the feeling of an iceberg, making them not want to get close to him. Seeing that Manager Liu was more respectful toward him than toward Ju Huaiming, Ju Ying immediately had an answer in her heart. This person was most likely the third prince, who was in charge of the Dongyang Navy. She just didn't know why he had suddenly come to visit. She quickly stopped the barking Zhuang and said, "Please come in." After sensing her gaze, Ju Huaiming asked in surprise, "Did you know who he is?" "I guessed," Ju Ying said, nodding. However, she was too embarrassed to greet him because they didn't take the initiative to introduce him. Instead, she bowed according to her original owner's memory and welcomed them into the house. After they sat down, Ju Huaiming asked curiously, "Sister, can you guess who he is?" The third prince frowned and glanced at him, But he still looked at Ju Ying curiously. To be honest, he really didn't expect that Ju Ying, who had lived in Beijing with him for many years, wouldn't recognize him. This commoner greets the third prince. Ju Ying stepped forward and bowed. Rise, sorry for the intrusion today. The third prince said. Thank you. Please wait a moment, I will go and make tea. After Ju Ying finished speaking, she turned around to leave. Ju Huaiming stopped her. Wait a minute. You can bring the mutton over as well. We'll have a hot pot for lunch. Please prepare a table for 8 people. Ju Ying took the lamb thoughtfully and said, All right, please wait a moment. After that, she took the mutton to the kitchen and made them a pot of Longjing tea. She brought in 9 teacups and poured them 1 cup each. Help yourselves. I'll go to the kitchen to prepare the food. Not long after she left, Jiyu Chungrui returned with a carriage. At the same time, he brought along County Magistrate's son, Tian Jingzhong, the village chief, and the patriarch. Jiyu Chungrui was carrying a copper pot. After sending them into the house, he handed the copper pot to Ju Ying and said, Babe, I'm afraid you won't be able to make it to the table today. Save some food for yourself. Ju Ying nodded and asked, Did that person come over because of the white potato? I'm 80% sure. I'm afraid we'll have to collect a portion of the sweet potatoes from the village and transport them to the south. I see. There's boiling water in the pot. You can entertain them by yourself. After Ju Ying finished speaking, she prepared the hot pot in the kitchen. It was far too difficult to cut the meat with a knife, so Ju Ying took it into her interspace and froze it. Then, she cut it with an automatic knife cutter, but she tried to make it as thick as possible. The base of the hot pot was a spicy and sour soup. The side dishes were mainly the vegetables that existed in the village, such as white radish, cabbage, bok choy, lettuce, pumpkin, and sweet potato. Finally, she took some extra tofu, vermicelli, agarwood, and taro. After they were ready, she started the fire. Jiyu Chungrui walked over and asked, Do you need any help? Are they done with talking? Ju Ying raised her head and asked. Yep. Jiyu Chungrui nodded and continued, According to the number of people in the village, every strong laborer will keep 500 pounds of sweet potatoes, and each child will have 300 pounds, and the rest will be transported to the south. County Magistrate Kong didn't say anything, but there are many victims elsewhere. The third prince said a batch of rice would be shipped here soon. They will be ground into powder together with sweet potato vines and various dried vegetables. Chapter 296 Harvest Output. It seems like my plan is going to fail. Ju Ying spoke with a depressed look. What's the plan? The white potato vines. I was thinking of bringing some to the manor to feed the cattle and sheep. I just let the news out this morning. Jiyu Chungrui pondered for a moment and said, Aren't the white sweet potatoes in the space mature? Let's go to the manor together to help harvest the sweet potatoes. I'll cover for you to take some out from the interspace. That's fine too. By the way, you can serve the dishes first. You can start eating once the fire is lit. All right, he said. After Jiyu Chungrui finished speaking, he walked out and served the dishes on the table. After Jiyu Chungrui brought the dishes back, the patriarch and manager Liu came over to help him with the dishes. Manager Liu looked at the white sweet potatoes on the table and asked in surprise, Miss Ju, you can even boil these sweet potatoes? Yes, but try to eat them last. It fills your stomach quickly. I see. I'll have a taste of white sweet potato as well. What? You've been guarding such a large sweet potato field and haven't eaten any of it. I can't bear to. I've only eaten the sweet potato vines. After manager Liu finished speaking, he began to help serve the dishes. By the time they were almost done, the charcoal was already burning. After it was packed, Jiyu Chungrui carried it in. In the end, Ju Ying gave them a jar of sorghum wine weighing about 5 pounds and then returned to the kitchen to use the remaining soup to make a sour lamb soup. They all had a full meal. After the meal, the group began collecting the white sweet potatoes in the village. Of course, they didn't take them for free. The third prince's price was 10 coppers per pound, which was quite a high price. Therefore, most of the villagers were willing to give up their harvest. After all, they could start planting again next spring. Of course, Ju Ying's house was the first stop. After leaving 1,000 pounds of white potatoes, the remaining 6,000 pounds were taken away. After they left, Ju Ying simply flattened the land and planted brown mustard, bok choy, and spinach. She stored half of the sweet potatoes in the cellar and planned to peel the other half with a paring knife, cut it into small pieces, and turn it into sweet potato rice to eat while the sun was still up. Rui, how many pounds of sweet potatoes yielded in 1 acre of land throughout the village? Ju Ying inquired after dinner. I'm not too sure. But overall, it should be around 6,000 pounds of white sweet potatoes per acre. The post-planted ones are slightly worse but still good overall. That's good. At least we can ensure that every family has food to eat, Ju Ying said. The couple began helping harvest the white potatoes at the manor over the next 3 days. Of course, they would also bring out some white potato vines from her interspace from time to time. However, because of Uncle Nyan, she didn't dare take out too much. She only took about 20 acres of white potato vines. After the planted white sweet potatoes were harvested, the third prince asked manager Liu, "How many pounds of sweet potatoes are there in this manor?" "I've just weighed it. The ones in the fields are about 8,000 pounds. The ones in the grasslands yielded a little less, about 5,000 pounds. By the way, there's another batch that was planted late." Ju Ying meant to wait another month before harvesting them. Manager Liu paused for a moment before continuing. "If we're talking about the best harvest of white sweet potatoes, it's Ju Ying's and her husband's. The yield per acre is more than 9,000 pounds. It's said that it's because her family's sweet potatoes have never been short of water. I think we should really do as she said and find a sandy land with sufficient water to plant them." "How many acres are left?" The third prince nodded in agreement and asked. "About 300 acres. I was the one who planted it after they started." "Keep them all. Other than the rations for the people in the village, they are also for next year's seeds. You'll also have to stay in the village after harvesting the white potatoes. First, you have to protect the safety of the husband and wife, and second, you must protect the cattle, sheep, and the remaining seeds. If the next year turns out well, you can work with County Magistrate Kong to promote sweet potatoes in Yunhe County." Chapter 297 A Reminder Understood. Manager Liu affirmed. On the other side, Chang Shun found Ju Ying and asked, "Mistress, I see that the ground is quite wet. Should we plant some winter wheat? Are there any more seeds in the manor?" Ju Ying asked. "I've left some, but not much, only about 10 acres worth. They are the seeds from the year before last, and they didn't grow well. I'm afraid it won't be acceptable." Ju Ying pondered for a moment and said, "Then pick the seeds carefully. Find the big and whole ones, plant as many seeds as possible. For the rest of the land, I'll give you some vegetable seeds later. You can plant them all. If people can't finish eating them, you can store them to feed the cattle and sheep." "Okay, then I'll go down and get people to fertilize the land." Chang Shun turned around and left after he finished speaking. Ju Ying found Jiyu Chungrue, who was drying the sweet potatoes in the field. The two of them greeted the third prince and Ju Huiming before going home. After the two entered the interspace at night, Ju Ying collected all the white potatoes. After washing the remaining potato vines, she dried them in the drying area. She collected some duck eggs and birds' nests too. After she was done, she packed 2 sacks of white potatoes and planned to send them to Zhao Cheng and the others in town. On the other end, Jiyu Chungrue, who had finished feeding various livestock, came back and understood her intention. He said, "Take out 2 more bags of the grass noodles I ground before. I guess they don't have much food left." "That's true. Give them 20 pounds of beef oil, 20 pounds of beef, and some amount of dried vegetables." Ju Ying proposed and prepared the items. After that, the two butchered all the mature cattle, sheep, pigs, chickens, and ducks and stored them in the warehouse. The following day, Jiyu Chungrue carried a carriage full of goods to town. Ju Ying carried 10 pounds of cabbage seeds, 10 pounds of snow barley seeds, and several rapeseed and spinach seeds and headed to the manor. When she arrived at the manor, she handed them over to Chang Shun, and everyone began getting busy. I didn't expect you to have so many vegetable seeds, Manager Liu said as he walked over. At the beginning of summer, when Manager Chiu of the seed shop was closing, I bought all the seeds at a low price. Ju Ying added, by the way, do you want some? You can plant it in your manor. Although it's a little late in the season, planting these vegetables is still doable. Manager Liu recalled that she had gone to the seed store many times to buy all kinds of vegetable seeds, so he believed her and said, sure, give me as much as you can. Okay, I'll come again in the afternoon. Ju Ying turned around to leave. Manager Liu quickly stopped her. Wait a minute. I'm looking for you as I need your help. Please speak. I want to buy 2 cattle from you and ask you to make some marinated beef, beef jerky, and other easy-to-bring cooked food for the third prince and the others to eat on the way. Oh, they're leaving so quickly? Yes, they're leaving the day after tomorrow. They have to rush to the south. By the way, inform the old farmers who know how to plant sweet potatoes to prepare to leave with the third prince. It'll be about 2 months before they return, so tell them to prepare. As soon as Ju Ying heard this, she knew he wasn't here to inform the old farmers but to inform her. After all, the manor was busy planting seeds. If a dozen or so old farmers were to leave at once, it would definitely affect the work of the manor. Okay, I'll come over tomorrow morning. She nodded. After Ju Ying exchanged a few words with him, she found Chang Shun and let him inform the old farmers. After that, she solemnly instructed, to prevent the potatoes from not acclimatizing to their new place, remember to ask the farmers to bring some soil with them when they leave. It can save the potatoes if there's any trouble. Chapter 298 The Excited Emperor. 1. You're sure meticulous. I'll remember this, and I'll personally prepare it for them. Chang Shun nodded. Also, tell them to pack their clothes well. Although it's hot in the south, it's cold here. They should wear cotton-padded clothes on the way back. That's true. Is there anything else? I can't think of anything more at the moment. I guess I'll ask Cheng Rui to make some medicine for them later. After Ju Ying finished speaking, she found Uncle Nyan and asked him to butcher 2 cows for tomorrow. She went home after that. At night, Ju Ying told Jiyu Cheng-rui about the third prince's departure the day after tomorrow. When the time comes, the old farmers in the manor will also follow. Just in case, you should prepare some medicine for them. I don't know if there's a flood in the place they are heading to. I'll go and ask Brother Ju myself later. You're right. I'll leave this to you then. Oh, right. When I was returning, I heard that more refugees were coming over. I don't know where they came from, so try not to go out alone in the future. More refugees. It seems that the coming days will not be easy. Indeed. I hope that the food that the third prince mentioned will come soon. Otherwise, our villages that have water will be in trouble. The following day, the 2 of them went to the manor. Ju Ying directly asked 2 women to help. One of the cattle was made into braised beef, and the other was made into beef jerky. In the afternoon, she turned the cattle's blood into blood tofu and distributed it to the people in the manor. As for the beef offal, Ju Ying mixed it with the beef tendons and made it into a beef offal soup, and it came out thick. It was the kind that could be mixed with water and served with vegetables. About 5,000 well-trained soldiers with knives, bows, and arrows rushed over in the middle of the afternoon. They also brought a long line of grain carriages. As soon as the carriages arrived, the group began to load the dried white sweet potatoes and wheat straw. They were busy until after midnight. Jiyu Cheng-rui also learned from Ju Huaiming that there was no flood at the place they were going. They were the only 2 prefectures in the Ming dynasty that weren't affected by any natural disasters. Therefore, he gave the old farmers some medicine to treat rheumatism. In the end, he brought some chili to the third prince and the others. Early the next morning, County Magistrate Kong and the others rushed to send off the third prince. Before they left, the third prince instructed everyone to promote the white sweet potatoes as soon as possible, then got into the carriage. Ju Ying handed over the manor to Chang Shun and Manager Liu as soon as the third prince left, while she stayed home like a cat. 5 days later. The capital city. In the imperial study. When the emperor, dressed in a purple dragon robe, saw the number of white sweet potatoes mentioned in the letter that the third prince had submitted through secret channels, his first reaction was disbelief. Although he didn't know much about farming, he, too, had a royal manor. From the annual reports, he knew that the highest output of taro could only reach 1,000 pounds. No matter how good the year was, winter wheat, grains, and the like would never exceed 200 pounds. How could there be a crop with a production of at least 5,000 pounds? What kind of concept was this? If there were really such high production crops, then the people of the Ming dynasty would no longer have to suffer from hunger and cold. He would also be remembered for thousands of years for this outstanding achievement. Thinking of this, he was getting excited. He was willing to believe the news this time. He looked at the guards and asked, "Chief Xiao, did the third prince give you anything else other than this letter?" "Yes, it's just a few dirt lumps, so I didn't bring them." Chief Xiao was stunned for a moment, bowed, and answered the question. "Dirt lumps? It's very likely a treasured crop. Hurry up and bring it to me." The emperor immediately stood up and shouted in excitement. Chapter 299 The Excited Emperor, 2, Yes. Chief Xiao responded, then turned and ran out. He returned to his office, picked up a small bag, and returned. He handed it to the emperor and said, reporting to the emperor, "This is the thing that was sent along with the letter." The emperor couldn't care less about his image and immediately opened the bag to take a look. Sure enough, there were a few long, dirt-like things. The big ones were about 2 pounds, and the small ones were much lighter. He thought back to the size of a taro. He got even more excited. If all the white sweet potatoes were similar and yielded well, it wouldn't be difficult for them to harvest 5,000 pounds per acre. He took out a small piece and looked at it. He remembered that the letter mentioned that this thing was eaten similarly to taro. He took the bigger piece and handed it to Eunuch Li, who was standing to the side and installing a background board. "Old Li, take this sweet potato to the imperial kitchen and steam it like taro. Stir-fry 2 dishes with it, and I'll mainly eat this for lunch." "Yes, this old servant will make the arrangements." Eunuch Li looked at the emperor's facial expression as if he had struck gold and hurriedly stepped forward to take the white potato with both hands. He then hurriedly rushed to the imperial kitchen. The imperial meal was served at noon, and the emperor had his eyes on the peeled white sweet potatoes as he gave Eunuch Li a look. Eunuch Li immediately stepped forward and used a knife to cut the sweet potatoes into pieces. He then picked up a bit and dipped it in white sugar before placing it on the small plate in front of the emperor. Only then did the emperor pick it up and take a bite. It was soft and sticky, and it was absolutely delicious. The key was that there was no peculiar smell, making it more delicious than taro. It was just that it was a little drier than taro, so he quickly asked Eunuch Li to pass him a glass of water. After eating 3 pieces in a row, he started to eat the stir-fried vegetables. After the meal, the emperor patted his full stomach and said, "Not bad. This is really good stuff. You can eat it as a staple food." He pointed at the remaining pieces and said to Eunuch Li, "Old Li, you should also try this. This is something the third prince found. Don't mind if I do." Eunuch Li saw the emperor wolfing down the food and knew it was good food. He immediately picked up the chopsticks and started eating. After he finished eating, the emperor asked, "How is it?" "It's good stuff. Those with bad teeth will definitely love to eat it." Eunuch Li said, "Yes, send the rest to the imperial kitchen. At night, steam a few pieces and send them to each court to let everyone try them. This may be one of the staple foods of our Ming dynasty in the future. Yes, this old servant will make the arrangements." When Eunuch Li was done speaking, he summoned the palace maids to clear the table and followed him to the imperial kitchen. After everyone had left, the emperor walked to the soft couch in the side hall and closed his eyes. He was naturally in a good mood. With this new crop, various disasters would pass quickly. However, thinking about the person who found it, he felt a headache. It was the Jiyu family's Jiyu Qingrui again. He had just suppressed him, and he didn't want to hear his name again so quickly. However, they had already repressed the water wheel incident once. If he did it again, it would be difficult to explain to the third prince. The key was that this kind of capable person would be a great hidden danger if he were to break away from the control of the royal family. It seemed that he had to reward them. However, how could he reward them so they would be grateful yet suppressed? Just as the emperor was conflicted, Eunuch Li once again sent white sweet potatoes into the imperial kitchen, and the news that white sweet potatoes could be used as a main course quickly spread throughout the palace. The current empress, who had received the letter, immediately felt something was wrong and quickly sent someone to find Eunuch Li to ask about the situation. Knowing that the Jiyu family had discovered it and that the third prince had presented it and had already started to promote it, her heart thumped. She quickly got someone to call the first prince over. Chapter 300 Reactions of Various Parties. Mother, what happened? Why are you in such a hurry to summon me into the palace? As he rushed over, the first prince inquired. Naturally, something big happened. After the empress finished speaking, she waved her hand to dismiss the palace servants. She had him sit beside her and told him about the white potatoes. The third prince discovered this, and it's another great achievement. If this continues, it'll be bad. It can't be. Hasn't father always been suppressing the Jew family? The first prince was shocked. But the emperor has not yet chosen a crown prince, and the third prince's power in the court is no less than yours. He is to be your most powerful opponent. You can't let him go on like this. The first prince nodded his head in agreement. It would be detrimental to him if the Jew family regained their position in the court. Mother, he asked, you just said that the person who found the white potato was Jiyu Chungrue, right? Yes, it's the third son of Ping Yang's family. If I remember correctly, he was the one who invented the water wheel last time, but we repressed it and pushed it onto someone else's. Why don't you send someone to investigate him? If there's anything good, then snatch it. If not, when the empress said this, she made the gesture of touching her neck. The first prince narrowed his eyes and said, indeed, the Jiyu family used to support my fourth brother with Princess Ping Yang, but now Jiyu Chungrue has sided with my third brother. If he isn't useful to us, then we can't keep him. Yup, you have to think carefully about arranging the people going over. Last time, the seventh son of the Su family suffered a great loss at the hands of the third prince. We can't follow in his footsteps. I understand. I'll get back to my work then. I'll come over to have dinner with you tonight, as I want to taste the sweet potatoes that father has been praising to the heavens. You only know how to take advantage of your mother. The empress scoffed jokingly. Remember to bring Yangran along, she said. She hasn't come to the palace to pay her respects in a long time. When the first prince heard her mention his wife, his expression immediately became impatient. However, he also knew they still had to rely on the prime minister's power, so he could only nod and answer, all right, I'll get going then. On the other side, the fourth prince had also received the news. He immediately summoned the seventh son of the Su family into the palace and ordered him to take advantage of the drought to send some people to Yunhe County to monitor Jiyu Chungrue. The emperor's mother was the only person happy in the palace because she was the third prince's only backer. In Shanghe village, the weather was good today. In the morning, Zhu Ying cut sweet potatoes in the courtyard to dry them. Suddenly, she heard a scream from next door, which almost made her cut her hand. At the thought of Qiu Niang, who was about to give birth, she put down her knife and ran over. She saw Da Hua trembling in the yard and quickly went into the house to take a look. She noticed Qiu Niang on the ground, biting her lower lip and sweating profusely. She quickly walked over and helped her stand by the bed. Qiu Niang, are you about to give birth? I think so. Qiu Niang nodded her head with difficulty. Lean against the bed first. I'll call for help. Zhu Ying turned around and walked out. She patted Da Hua's shoulder and asked, Da Hua, do you know where your mother is? Da Hua raised her head and nodded in panic. Yes. Hurry up and inform your mother. Tell her that your aunt is about to give birth and ask her to inform the midwife. Oh. Da Hua responded and ran out in a panic. Zhu Ying stopped a child running by the street and asked him to go to the Qian clanland and call Qian Jiawang back. She then returned to the house to support Qiu Niang and slowly walked into the house. Chapter 301. A chubby boy. In less than 15 minutes, Sister Tian rushed in and asked, "How is she? When did it start to hurt?" "I'm not sure, but it seems like she's been in pain for quite a while." Ju Ying shook her head. "About 2 hours. At first, it was just a burst of pain, but the real pain started about 15 minutes ago." Qiu Niang replied, panting heavily. "That's good. It appears that we will have some more time." Elder Sister Tian heaved a sigh of relief, then said to Ju Ying, "Sister, please take care of her for a while. I must clean up the delivery room and boil some water quickly." "All right. By the way, the midwife." Xing Wang went to get her. He ran fast. After Elder Sister Tian finished speaking, she turned around and left. After a while, Tian Jiawang came over with a white-haired woman. Ju Ying briefly explained the situation and turned to go home. After dinner, Qiu Niang's screams finally stopped, and soon, the tender cry of a baby could be heard. Ju Ying finally heaved a sigh of relief. This delivery sounded scary. It took 10 hours, and it should be life-threatening. She should be fine. Some women give birth for 2 days and 2 nights. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many women who died from difficult labor. Jiyu Chungrui paused for a moment. He was afraid of scaring her, so he quickly and carefully said, "Of course, it will go smoothly with a healthy body." Ju Ying looked at his eager expression and smiled. "Don't worry, I understand. I won't be scared." "That's good." Jiyu Chungrui laughed and continued, "By the way, tomorrow morning, send them 20 eggs and 5 pounds of black noodles. Aren't the eggs a little too few? We're their bosses, right? It's quite a lot in these times. Nowadays, anyone who can eat an egg is living well, not to mention the black noodles. At most, I'll send more over when we have the opportunity in the future. Otherwise, it'll be hard to explain with just 3 chickens in our backyard." "I'll do as you say, then. I'll also give them a small jar of red sugar fermented rice." "That's okay." The following day, after Jiyu Chungrui left, Ju Ying carried a basket and a small bag to their neighbor. Seeing that Tian Jiawang was slaughtering chickens in the courtyard, she walked over and asked, "Brother Tian, are you preparing to make chicken soup?" "Yes, it's for Qiu Niang's nourishment." Tian Jiawang stood up and answered, "That's great. Anything for the mother and child, right? There was nothing good I could give this year. I've brought some black noodles, eggs, and a jar of fermented rice in red sugar as a token of our appreciation. This is already lovely. Qiu Niang needs these, so thank you very much." Tian Jiawang thanked her happily. He took the goods and said, "Let's go in and see the child. In 2 days. The child is too young now, I shouldn't risk the baby catching a cold." "Oh right, try not to let Qiu Niang eat the sweet potatoes as much as possible, that will make her stomach bloated." Ju Ying asked curiously, "Did she give birth to a boy or a girl?" "It's a chubby boy." Tian Jiawang grinned. "Congratulations, Brother Tian. All right, I'll leave you to your work as I have to go back to sun-dry the white potatoes." After Ju Ying finished speaking, she turned around and went home to get busy. When it was almost noon, they suddenly heard the sound of hurried footsteps, followed by Zhuang's barking. She saw Qian Shisan rushing in with a refugee carrying a 3- or 4-year-old boy. Behind them was a woman crying. Ju Ying was stunned for a moment. She quickly got up and asked while stopping Zhuang, 13th uncle, Chapter 301. Emergency rescue. The child caught a cold and has a high fever. "I am here to ask if there's any fever medicine." Qian Shisan asked. "Please save the child. He's still young, and he can't die like this." The man kneeled with his child. "Get up first, come in and let me take a look. If it doesn't work, we'll have to send you all to town as soon as possible." After Ju Ying finished speaking, she turned around and walked into the house. When the man heard this, he immediately carried his child and followed in. Qian Shisan also followed immediately. After entering the west room, Ju Ying asked the man to put the child on the bed. After ensuring that the child had only caught a cold and had a high fever, she used medical alcohol to wipe his body. After that, she found the scraping board and scraped the child's back, giving him gua sha treatment. She scraped back and forth on some of the more heavily discolored areas, stopping only when the color faded. Qian Shisan looked at the child, whose expression had returned to normal. He reached his hand against the child's forehead and said, the fever has really gone down. It's good that it works." Ju Ying exhaled a sigh of relief. She wrapped the child with a layer of gauze and said, "Don't let his back get wet for 24 hours. To avoid infection, do not remove the gauze. As for the medicine, I don't dare to prescribe it since the child is too young. However, I know a folk remedy. It is to boil scallions and ginger together and drink them to get rid of a cold. If you have a fever again at night, come back and let Dr. Jiu take a look. He might prescribe medicine then. We do have ginger, but scallions." The man was put in a difficult position. "I'll get you some." After Ju Ying finished speaking, she went to the kitchen and brought him 5 small onions. "Take these first, they should be enough for 2 portions. How much is it?" The man reached into his pocket reluctantly. "It's fine. Quickly take the child back to make the drink." Ju Ying hesitated for a moment and shook her head. "Thank you. Thank you so much." After the man finished speaking, he carried the child and walked out. When Ju Ying saw them out, she saw the woman standing in front of the rack of dry white potato grains. She was grabbing some white potato grains and eating them. Ju Ying's face darkened. At the same time, Qian Shisan's face also turned ugly. They were here to save the child, but as the child's mother, she didn't care about the life and death of her child and instead stole food. This was just neglectful. Of course, the man's expression looked the worst among them. He immediately roared, "You cheap woman, did I ever starve you?" The woman's body stiffened for a moment. She grabbed 2 more handfuls and quickly ran out. When the man took off his shoes and was about to throw them at her, the child in his arms started crying. He could only hug the child again. "Forget it," Ju Ying said. "Hurry and take the child back. Thank you. I really don't know how I can face you again." After the man apologized, he ran out of the village as if he were escaping. Seeing this, Ju Ying said to Qian Shisan, "Uncle, don't let these refugees enter the village in the future. If there is a need for medical treatment, ask them to wait for Chungrue in the morning." "I understand. I've really caused you trouble today. It's okay. She didn't eat much. It's just that she's disgusted me. Also, I'm afraid that the refugees will be greedy and steal. I'll take note of this and let the village chief know." After Qian Shisan finished speaking, he hurriedly chased after the family, afraid that the woman would turn around and cause more trouble. Fortunately, the woman was probably afraid of being beaten up, so she ran all the way up the mountains without stopping. Ju Ying turned around and walked to where the sweet potatoes were drying. She threw away the basket of grains the woman had touched, then turned around and went to the kitchen to make a bowl of noodles. Chapter 303 Conspiracy. On the other hand, after climbing up the mountain, the man gave the scallions to his mother and asked her to assist him in making the white ginger scallion soup. In a fit of rage, he found the woman hiding behind his in-laws. He stepped forward and pulled her out of the mother god temple. He raised his hands and gave her 2 slaps, saying, "You bitch, how could you embarrass me? I just saved your child, and you turned around and stole from our benefactor. Are you still human? What are you doing? What are you doing? How can you hit her?" The man's father-in-law ran over and pulled them away. "Ask her what she's done. I'm too embarrassed even to say it." The man pointed at the woman's nose. The father-in-law laughed. "Hey, I thought it was a big deal. It's just a few handfuls of white potatoes, and they don't lack them. Do you have to be so angry?" Hearing this, the man thought of something and pulled the woman over again. He glanced at her empty pockets and said, "Where are the white potatoes?" "In the pot." It's noon, so, when his father-in-law was halfway through his sentence, the man snorted coldly. "You traitor. Since you're so loyal to your family, then live with your family." He then turned around and returned to the mother god temple. When the woman saw this, she hurriedly chased after him. "Darling, wait. Please don't drive me away." "My mother, really, what about your son?" "Get lost." The man pushed her away and walked into the small shed that they had built. When the father-in-law saw this, he ignored her daughter and returned to his small shed. The woman burst into tears, but no one paid her any attention. In the end, she obediently returned to the man's side. However, there was no food for her, so she could only starve. After lunch, the man took an axe and climbed the mountain to chop firewood. He had to send 2 bundles of firewood to show his gratitude, regardless of whether they needed it. He also wanted to see if there was any more ginger, which was indispensable in the winter. At this time, in his father-in-law's house, the old woman, who was also the man's mother-in-law, said happily, "I didn't expect these white potatoes to be so filling. There were only 2 handfuls, but we can drink a bowl of mush from it." Of course. Otherwise, the third prince wouldn't have offered such a high price to buy the seeds and send them to the south. The father-in-law shook his head and continued, "Sigh, if I had known there was such a good thing, I would have come to the village in advance to take some. We wouldn't have to survive on tree bark, leaves, and wild vegetable soup every day then. Father, it's not too late now. Each family in the village got quite a lot of them. Besides, the late-planted ones are still growing in the fields." At this moment, their son walked over and whispered, "No, there are not only patrols around the village but also soldiers." "I'm afraid." The father-in-law shook his head. "What are you afraid of? Their patrol team is not always watching the foot of the mountain. When they leave, we can just rush over." "That's right. We won't steal from the villagers' homes. We'll just go to the fields and dig some. Otherwise, we won't be able to hold on without solid food." The mother-in-law added. "Well," the father-in-law hesitated for a moment before saying, "We'll have to contact more people. Otherwise, we'll be beaten to death if we're caught. I'll get in touch with them. Actually, most people have the same idea. Otherwise, how are we going to survive the winter?" "Sure, but you must find someone reliable. Don't let the news leak out." "Don't worry, I'll contact them now. We'll take action tonight." In the evening, the man gave the firewood to Chen Shisan and asked Chen Shisan to help deliver it to the Jiyu family. He turned around and returned to the Mother God temple. Seeing his son looking around, he walked over and touched his head. "I didn't expect it to really work. The fever sure did go down." Chapter 304 got discovered. It's indeed effective, but it's best to get 2 more doses of actual medicine, just in case. The man's mother said. "That's true. It'll be troublesome if it worsens at night. I'll bring him over after dinner." The man nodded. After the meal, the man carried his child down the mountains. However, he was sternly rejected when he reached the foot of the mountain and went to the shed to find the official guarding the mountains. The man had more or less guessed the reason, but when he looked down at the child in his arms, he still pleaded, "Please, it's just the 2 of us this time. Just let the brothers in the patrol team follow me." "No, you wait here. I'll send someone to get Dr. Jiyu." The officer shook his head. The man could only sit down with the child in his arms. "Thank you, brother." The officer didn't give him a good look. When the patrol team came over, he requested them to go over and invite Dr. Jiyu over. Jiyu Chungrue had already heard about this from Ju Ying. So after receiving the notice, he took some relatively cheap medicines and went to the foot of the mountain. After checking the child's pulse, Jiyu Chungrue gave him 3 doses of medicine and said, "To put it bluntly, this child is sick due to malnutrition and insufficient food. When you have time, go to the mountains to find some red dates or Chinese yam. Otherwise, he will catch a cold from time to time in the winter. He should be fine after taking these 3 doses of medicine." After he finished speaking, he passed the medicines to him. Thank you so much. How much are the medicines?" "No need, just send down 2 more bundles of firewood to us. It will save us the trouble of going up the mountains." "You guys need firewood?" The man's eyes lit up. Jiyu Chungrue looked at his expression and knew what he was thinking. He nodded and said, "That's right, we need them in preparation for the winter. If you have extra firewood, you can sell it to me. A bundle of 50 pounds of firewood is 5 coppers, and the shrubs to light the firewood are 3 coppers. I understand. Remember, the officer reminded the man, you can only cut branches like before. Otherwise, if you're discovered, you won't be able to live in the mountains. I remember, yes, the man responded, carrying the medicines and his child back to the Mother God temple. After returning home, he told his brothers about the matter, which excited them a little. No matter what, they could go to the village with this little income and buy some sweet potatoes. The family happily went to sleep, but they got happy too early. After midnight, about 10 strong laborers quietly walked out of Mother God temple, carrying burlap sacks with them. 2 even brought 2 longboards as they sneaked down the mountains. However, they didn't go down the mountains directly. Instead, they walked along the mountains to the outside of the village, near a trench with lush bushes. After the patrol team left the area, they immediately placed the longboards and quickly crossed the trench. The group of people quietly rushed into the fields. When they arrived at the sweet potato field, the group of people were like mice entering a rice jar. They quickly and greedily dug up the sweet potatoes, even picking up bunches of radishes and scallions. After they had filled more than half of their sacks, they turned around and walked back. However, their luggage wasn't as light as when they came, which was much more cumbersome. Hence, they were discovered by the patrol team when they were halfway there. The group of people wanted to throw the white potatoes away and run, but they couldn't bring themselves to give up at that point. In the end, the brother-in-law of the man with the sick child said, "We have 10 people, and they have 8. We have to fight it out if it comes down to it. But what if they come up the mountains to us? Are you stupid? Let's not go back to Mother God temple. With these white sweet potatoes, we can hide for half a month." Chapter 305 Dispersing the refugees. Let's just go all out. Otherwise, we'll be skinned alive if we're caught, if we don't die from the beating. After he finished speaking, the thieves put the white potatoes aside and rushed over. When the patrol team saw this, they were stunned. When they came back to their senses, the leader of the patrol team, Chen Jiaxi, cursed, "Motherfucker, a bunch of white-eyed wolves. Don't let any of them go." After saying that, the 2 sides clashed and started fighting. There were screams soon after, which quickly attracted the attention of the other 2 patrol teams and officers. Not long later, they surrounded the thieves. A moment later, the refugees were pressed to the ground. Chen Jiaxi heaved a sigh of relief. "Everyone, check on each other. Those who are seriously injured, go to Dr. Jiu and get your wounds bandaged. The rest of you tie them up and bring them to the ancestral hall with the white potatoes over there." "All right, let's split up." Jiu Changyu responded and rushed to Jiu Chengrue's place with the injured personnel. When Jiu Chengrue was woken up, he was shocked to see the group of people outside. "Second brother, what are you?" People came down from the mountains to steal sweet potatoes and met the patrol team. Blood was spilled when they clashed. Jiu Chengyu pointed at his forearm. "Hurry up and come in. I'll bandage everyone up." Jiu Chengrue brought them to the kitchen after he was done. After lighting the lights, he told them to wait inside and said, "There's water in the jug. If you need a drink, pour it yourself." After he finished speaking, he went to the west room to get his first aid box and began to bandage them. After Jiu Chengrue was done, he gave them a few instructions and sent them back. The next day, early in the morning, Tian Jingzhong and the village chief brought all the soldiers and patrol officers to drive down the refugees from the nearby mountains. They then arranged for them to stay in the empty houses in town. As for the people who were caught, they were all arranged to work in the mill, including their family members. In the afternoon, a deputy general brought over the grains the third prince had promised. However, rice made up only a tiny part of it, while taro and sorghum were the majority. But this was enough to make Tian Jingzhong very happy. After that, he collected the white sweet potato vines that were almost dried, then some dried vegetables, which he mixed with the grains and ground into a flour-like powder. After that, the flour and taro were distributed to the grain stores controlled by various officials. They were to be distributed in limited quantities. With the sale of the flour, the underground water slowly recovered, probably due to the flood in the south. Most of the wells began to produce water once again. The number of refugees gathered in the vicinity decreased significantly, especially from the neighboring Qingshui town. Besides those from other places, most of them were preparing to go home. The refugees from other places had gathered in the warehouse again, but there were much fewer than before. The village suddenly got lively. Early one morning, Ju Ying was drying her sweet potatoes in the courtyard when Sixth Aunt Ji came in with a smile. She commented, "You sure are busy. Sixth Aunt Ji, you're here? Why don't you take advantage of the good weather to dry the sweet potatoes?" "Oh, how's it going at your house?" Ju Ying asked as she brought her a stool. "As you said, most of them were sun-dried, and the rest were buried in a hole to keep them from rotting." After she sat down, Sixth Aunt Ji said, "It's good, but it's been too cold recently. You guys have to keep an eye on it, otherwise, it'll be inedible once it's frozen." "I will." After that, she helped Ju Ying wash some sweet potatoes as she said, "Over the past 2 days, many people have come to the village to buy white sweet potatoes. I heard that your manor still has some in stock. Do you want to sell some?" Ju Ying shook her head. "The white sweet potatoes in the manor are the seeds of our county next year. If I dare to sell them privately, County Magistrate Kong will throw me into a pot of oil and fry me." Chapter 306 Buying Firewood. Sixth Aunt Gus's face turned pale, and she laughed dryly. "It's not that serious. That's your own manor, you know? We're only in charge. The real master is General Ju." "That's a pity. From what you're saying, the price of those potatoes is high." "That's right. It's 15 coppers per pound. For larger sizes, such as those from your fields, it's already gone up to 30 coppers per pound. Many people are regretting selling too early. It's so expensive. Do you know who bought it?" "I'm not sure, but the price is almost as high as the price of pork. It's not something that ordinary people like us can afford to eat. There are also relatives who came to ask for information. Sigh, it's getting difficult. No matter what, keeping the food in your hands is better." "That's true, but many were blinded by the money and can't understand that." Sixth Aunt Ji agreed with a nod. After that, the two of them chatted for a while, and Ju Ying found out more gossip through her. Because of the white potato, the villagers' days weren't peaceful. This was especially true for Gu Chengru's old residents. They grew many late-season white sweet potatoes, and many people were eyeing them and wanting to buy them. People would come to their residences every day to tempt them. However, each family had their own plans, and they were all cunning. Other than Zhong Qingqing, who used her father's matter to threaten them and agreed to sell them £1,000, the others were all ignored. In the afternoon, Ju Ying was just about to take Zhuang to the manor when she heard someone calling her. She turned her head and saw Jiyu Chengye from a distance. He was walking over with a man pulling a cart full of firewood. She waited in place, and Ju Ying recognized the man at a glance when they came over. It was the father of the little boy she had saved a few days ago. "Second brother, this is?" Ju Ying asked. This man said that Cheng Rui had told him about buying firewood before. "Didn't he send you a truckload today?" Jiyu Chengye said. "Does Mrs. Jiyu still remember me? Dr. Jiyu said that I could use 100 pounds of firewood as payment for the medicine." The man said. "He did tell me about this, but you sure moved quickly. I didn't expect you to keep your word." Ju Ying opened the door and continued, "If you collect more firewood, just pile it up in the shed." "Ah, don't worry. The firewood here is £50 per bundle, more or less." After the man finished speaking, he pulled his small cart over. At that time, Ju Ying also discovered that a younger man was pushing the cart with all his might behind her. Afterward, the two put the firewood in the shed, and Ju Ying counted on the side. There were 12 bundles in total, about £600 in total. After deducting the £100 for the medicine, she needed to pay 50 coppers. "In addition to the medicine, I'll give you another 50 coppers. Is that all right?" she asked. Yes, 50 coppers is all right." The man smiled and nodded repeatedly. He hesitated and asked, "I wonder if we can get some white sweet potato vines?" Ju Ying was stunned for a moment. "I'm sorry. We really can't do that. Our family's white sweet potatoes have all been transported away." She thought of the vegetables she had saved and continued, "If you don't want money, I can give you some dried lettuce." "Dried lettuce? That's even better." The man's eyes lit up. "Wait a moment." Ju Ying turned around and went to the cellar. She took out a sack of dried lettuce weighing about 30 pounds and handed it to them. "Well, take it at 2 coppers per pound, so here are 30 pounds. If you still want to collect firewood, how about we deduct it from you next time?" Chapter 307 Seedlings. Oh, how much firewood do you need? "Well, send it over to you in a few days." The man took the sack and threw it into his cart, nodding repeatedly. 5 more carts will do, Ju Ying said after some thought. This way, she could help them, and she wouldn't have to go up the mountains to chop firewood. "All right, well, come over every other day. We won't disturb you any further." After the man finished speaking, he turned around and pushed his cart outside. Jiu Chengye's eyes flickered when he heard that. When the refugees went up the mountain to chop branches and tree bark, their household bought their firewood along with Ju Ying. Although some were still left, it would be difficult to get through the winter. However, he and his big brother had been on patrol day and night. Her father and uncle still had to take care of the vegetables and sweet potatoes in the field, so they had no time to go up the mountain to gather more firewood. Even if they had the time, they probably couldn't handle that kind of work. Therefore, after they left, Jiu Chengye asked, "Are you planning to keep cutting firewood? I also want to buy some. How about 2 bundles of firewood for 1 pound of white sweet potato or 1 bundle for 10 pounds of white sweet potato vines?" "Really?" the man asked in disbelief. He had been walking around the village for more than half a day, so he knew others were buying sweet potatoes at a high price of 15 coppers per pound. According to his firewood price, he was earning more than 10 coppers per pound, and he would greatly benefit from this. "I won't lie to you. Just tell me if you want to trade or not." "Well, trade, but I prefer the white potato vines." "All right, send 10 more carts to my house once you're done. Remember to bring firewood like the ones you sent earlier. Don't try to fool me with shrubs." "I won't, don't worry." On the other side, Ju Ying locked the door after they left and took Zhuang to the manor. She went into the field to look at the seedlings situation. Needless to say, the vegetables were from seeds produced in her interspace, so the seedling was growing excellently and tenaciously. On the other hand, the 3 acres of wheat looked frail, although their yield rate was decent. Chang Shun, who received the news of her arrival, immediately ran over. "Mistress, you're here. This wheat looks all right, I think." "It's all right, but it looks a little frail. It's mainly because of its aged wheat. However, it'll be much better next year once we let it grow a little more." "All right. Remember to water it once before winter. Even if it doesn't snow, we won't be short of water." "I understand." When Changshun said this, he pointed to the vegetables not far away and asked, "Mistress, what is that?" "I've never seen it before." "That's brown mustard. The yield rate of this crop is quite high, and after it's marinated, it can be cooked, fried, stuffed, steamed, and so on. There are a lot of these in the capital, but they aren't common here." "I see. If that's the case, we won't lack vegetables in the winter." "That's right, no matter what, we have to fill our stomachs." After Ju Ying finished speaking, she went to the cultivation area with him. She saw Manager Liu and Uncle Nyan sitting under the sun, focused on playing the board game Go. She was surprised before she walked over and stood to the side to watch. After they finished a round, the two noticed Ju Ying standing at the side. Uncle Nyan immediately stood up, but Ju Ying motioned for him to sit down and said, "You guys continue playing. I'm just here to take a look at the wheat seedlings and to take a look around." "Oh, right. The wheat seedling is doing fine, but there's just not enough." Manager Liu answered. "There's no other way. There are not enough seeds. By the way, what did you plant in your manor?" "Nothing else except the vegetable seeds you gave me. I'd plant all white sweet potatoes next year if the weather is decent." Chapter 308 Complaining You're Right. Ju Ying nodded. Then, she paused and asked, "By the way, Many came to the village over the last 2 days to buy white potatoes at the price of 15 coppers per pound. Do you know who they are? Are they really asking at such a high price? Could it be someone rich that's collecting seeds? Manager Liu asked with a pensive look. It seemed that he would have to send someone to inquire about this. If a rich man was indeed buying these potatoes, it should be fine. He was afraid that someone was scheming something terrible, and the villagers wouldn't have enough to eat when they sold their food and would end up directing their anger at them instead. That would be troublesome. I'm not sure. I've only heard a little about it, but there are quite a lot of them in the village. Aren't they digging their own graves? Those white potatoes are their life-saving food. Chang Shun asked in shock. Each family has their own plans, and we can't control them. After Ju Ying finished speaking, she went to the cow and sheep pens. She was relieved to see that their birth rate had dropped significantly. After reminding them to store more firewood, she went directly home. When she got home, she saw it was still early, so she made a pot of millet porridge with white potatoes. After that, she kept the white potato grains hanging outside back into the house and went into her interspace to stir-fry a plate of cabbage and garlic, twice-cooked pork, and a plate of sauced beef. When Jiyu Chungrui returned, they immediately started eating dinner. Afterwards, when Ju Ying finished washing the dishes, she saw Jiyu Chungrui sitting in a daze at the end of the bed. She walked over and asked, "What's wrong? Did something happen?" Jiyu Chungrui pulled her into his arms and replied, "There are malaria and dysentery in the south. All the antiparasitic, antibacterial, and antitoxin drugs have been transferred there. Isn't that a good thing? If they need you to concoct the medicine, it means that the imperial court is doing disaster relief. That's true, let's hope there are fewer people dying. I'm just worried that something might happen here and that there's no medicine left. Sigh, it's been 2 years, and it's been one disaster after another. I don't know when it'll calm down. It should be soon. If this continues, humanity will go extinct. I hope so." The next morning, just as Jiyu Chungrui left, Mrs. Bai came looking for them. Ju Ying was stunned for a moment. "Auntie, what a rare guest. Come and have a seat inside." "I'm fine. I'm free, so I just came to chat with you. Let's just sit in the courtyard, it'll be warmer with the sun." "That's true. I'll just cut some more sweet potatoes and let them dry." After Ju Ying finished speaking, she first brought 2 chairs over. She took out a bag of white potatoes, washed them, rubbed them, and finally cut them into small pieces. "Your work is really fine, I just cut them all into slices." Mrs. Bai said it in surprise. "I'm free anyway, so you mean that you've already started drying all your potatoes?" "Yeah, we have a lot of us, and the place is big, so it's naturally faster." After the two of them chatted for a while, Mrs. Bai complained in a low voice. Many of the sweet potatoes at home were used to help out the village chief's daughter's family, but she wasn't allowed to help her maternal family. Also, if there was good food, it didn't matter if they had enough to eat, they would give the village chief's daughters a portion first. In short, she was dissatisfied with how the village chief handled things. Especially when it came to financial aid, the sweet potatoes given to his daughter's family were in accordance with the usual amount. When it came to her family, they only got 200 pounds of potatoes and some vegetables, which made her uncomfortable. She looked at Ju Ying. "Ying, don't you think this is just unfair? If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have supported letting my sister-in-law and her family stay in the village." Ju Ying hesitated and asked, "Auntie, did Tinius aunt take a share of your family's grain reserve? In other words, did they split your share of the white sweet potatoes?" "No, they didn't. They helped harvest, transport, and weigh the white sweet potatoes from the beginning. Thus, the third prince treated her family as part of our family when they were dividing white sweet potatoes." Chapter 309 Clear-headed right, but was the white sweet potato your family gave to the Bai family squeezed from your reserve? Ju Ying asked again. Mrs. Bai was stunned for a moment. She opened her mouth but didn't know what to say. She wasn't happy, but she wasn't stupid. After listening to Ju Ying's analysis, she knew she was overthinking it. Although Tiany's aunt and family were assigned to their family, They did not consume their food because they worked for it. To put it bluntly, their family didn't owe her anything. Instead, the food that Mrs. Bai had given to her maternal family had been squeezed out of her own family's mouths. Ju Ying knew she had changed her mind, so she didn't persuade her anymore. Instead, she asked, "By the way, Auntie, are you not digging for arrowroot this year?" As soon as Mrs. Bai heard her change the topic, she immediately heaved a sigh of relief and answered, "I wanted to, but the mountain has been turned over by the refugees several times. They've already dug it clean, so we can only wait for next year." That's right. If it wasn't for the intervention of the village constable, the mountain would have turned bald a long time ago. Ju Ying nodded in agreement. After that, the two of them chatted for a while. Mrs. Bai collected all the souls she had been working on while chatting, got up, and returned home. When she entered her house, she saw the village chief drying some more sweet potatoes in the yard. She immediately put her shoes aside and said, "Father, I can handle this. If you have time, you should teach Tikniu how to read." The village chief was surprised that she was no longer pulling a long face, and he finally heaved a sigh of relief. "It's fine. It's cold now, so don't flip the potatoes over too often." As for why she suddenly had her head cleared, he didn't bother to ask. It was fine if the family was harmonious and there were no conflicts. Just as he stood up, he saw a teenager running in. "Grandpa Chief, hurry up and come help take a look. Our family is fighting. You're Zhong Laosan's grandson, right? Tell me why your family is fighting." The village chief sized him up and said, "My grandfather wanted to give 800 pounds of white sweet potatoes to my aunt's family, but my mother doesn't agree. She said that if they were to give it, they would split up. This bastard, even if he really wants to help your aunt, he shouldn't just leave your family to starve." When the village chief heard this, he was dumbfounded. "But I don't think I can veto your grandfather on this matter alone. I'll go over first, but you should quickly go and find your eldest grandfather." "All right, please hurry up." The boy turned around and ran away after saying that. Seeing this, the village chief simply tidied up his clothes, then went out with his hands behind his back. After listening to their conversation, Mrs. Bai had mixed feelings. It seemed that she had been too narrow-minded before. Previously, her father-in-law had given her maternal family 200 pounds of white sweet potatoes, which was considered good enough. Although nothing major happened in the village after that, there were still many conflicts because of the matter of helping out relatives who were outsiders. However, Ju Ying didn't take it to heart and just let it pass. On the other hand, Manager Liu found out that the first prince's men were involved through the people who collected the white potatoes. However, he didn't alert anyone. Instead, he asked someone to watch them carefully and see what they were up to. In the blink of an eye, it was Qionyang's son's 1-month-old birthday. Ju Ying gave 2 pounds of white cotton and a piece of blue cotton cloth to Qionyang. It was just enough to make a small cotton coat for the child. The next step was to harvest the remaining white sweet potatoes. This time, Jiyu Chungrue and Ju Ying went together. After collecting everything and leaving enough food for the people in the manor, he dug a cellar and buried the rest with sand, covering them with a layer of wheat straw. 2 days later, at night, Jiyu Chungye and Jiyu Chungji came with a cart full of stuff. There were about 300 pounds of sweet potatoes, 200 pounds of radishes, and 200 pounds of cabbage each. There were also 4 to 5 winter melons and pumpkins. Chapter 310 Loki O, push the cart to the back and put it in the cellar. Jiyu Chungrue brought them to the back of the house and helped put everything in the basement together. After they were done, Jiyu Chungrue saw 2 jars of about 5 pounds of beef oil in the cellar. He gave them one and said, "Take this beef oil with you, stewing cabbage with it is delicious." "Sure, thanks," Jiyu Chungye said as he took it. "By the way, how's the yield of sweet potatoes in its second season?" To be honest, they're not as plentiful as the ones in the spring. This season's white sweet potatoes didn't lack fertilizer and never lacked water from the beginning to the end. However, they only produced 6,000 pounds per acre. Jiyu Chungji gave his report. "In any case, indeed, we don't have to worry about going hungry for the next year," Jiyu Chungye continued. By the way, are these 300 pounds of white sweet potatoes enough? If they aren't enough, 111 bring more over. Otherwise, you won't be able to buy them in the future, even if you want to. What do you mean? Are you guys trying to sell the sweet potatoes? That's right. Storing it at home would attract people's attention. After the third prince stopped accepting them, we gave Zikir's family 500 pounds. Constable Tien bought 2,000 pounds for 10 coppers per pound, and we also sold Zhong Qingqing 1,000 pounds. I don't even know if one can keep the remaining 5,000 pounds. How about this? 111 by 2,000 pounds from you, and you can tell others that you sold all 5,000 pounds. This way, you can secretly leave a portion of it behind just in case. You can take it if you want, you don't have to pay. Jiyu Chengye replied. Jiyu Chengrue immediately knew it was just a courtesy, as 2,000 pounds of white potatoes were 20 taels of silver. How could they give it away for free? He shook his head and replied, we already have enough for ourselves. These are for Dr. Luo, so we'll just pay according to the normal price. I see. Well, heed your advice, as that'll save us a lot of trouble. Jiyu Chengye nodded. Jiyu Chengji didn't object when he heard this. Jiyu, she was still an apprentice at the clinic, so no one could say anything about selling it to them. Okay, it's a deal. I'll find 2 carts and go there tomorrow morning. Alright, we'll be going back now. After that, the 2 brothers went home, carrying the beef oil in their carts. After Mrs. Chiao and the others learned that they had brought back a jar of beef oil, they were thrilled. This was especially so for Jiyu Chengji's wife, Mrs. Yang. The oil mill had been closed for nearly a year, and the oil reserves at home had been used up. It was fine if the adults didn't have oil for their daily meals, but not the children. By the way, Chengji, she asked, does Chengrue have meat at home? We can buy some from them. I didn't see it. There were only 2 jars of beef oil in their cellar, and he even gave us 1 jar. That's enough. It's good enough to have this jar of oil. Don't be so greedy. They would have given it to us long ago if they really had it. Mrs. Chiao said. I heard that there are a lot of cattle and sheep in their manor. It's not like we aren't paying for them. Mrs. Yarrow said unhappily. She couldn't stand it anymore, let alone her child. Her pants were almost slipping down her waist after not having meat in the past 6 months. Indeed. Can't we buy from them? Mrs. Liu echoed. Let's not talk about this. First, the manor doesn't belong to the couple in the first place. Now that Manager Liu is there, it's not like they can decide that on their own. Moreover, the villagers are all eating plainly. Do you dare fill our house with the fragrance of meat? Won't this attract hatred? It'll be troublesome if you attract thieves. Father Jiyu reminded them. Indeed, when it's time to be low-key, we must act the part. Didn't you see that they don't even dare to eat meat anymore? Second Uncle Jiyu chimed in. Right. Speaking of keeping a low profile, Chengrue gave us an idea. At this point, Jiyu Chengye told them how Jiyu Chengrue had bought their white sweet potatoes but left some for them secretly. Chapter 311 Checking up on everyone right. Speaking of keeping a low profile, Chengrue gave us an idea. At this point, Jiyu Chengye told them how Jiyu Chengrue was planning to falsify the number of potatoes he was buying from them. This is a good idea. These 3,000 pounds of potatoes will be our family's life-saving food if this drought continues. Father Jiyu nodded in agreement. What do you think, brother? He asked second Uncle Jiyu. That's a good idea. Let's quickly preserve these white sweet potatoes, so they don't have to be frozen and unfrozen repeatedly. Second Uncle Jiyu nodded. On the other hand, Jiyu Chengrue went to the patriarch's house to borrow an ox cart after his brothers left. The next morning, before the sun rose, he took a horse carriage and an ox cart to pull 2 full carts of white sweet potatoes. He went to Jiyu Chengye and asked him to follow him to his clinic in town. Jiyu Chengye also took a cart full of white potatoes, gathering 2,000 pounds in total. When Dr. Luo came to the clinic and saw the white sweet potatoes in the courtyard, he looked at Jiyu Chengrue excitedly and asked, Chengrue, are these all for me? You can say that, But it's from my father's side, so you have to pay 10 coppers per pound. It's only fitting. It's good enough that I'm able to buy some. With these sweet potatoes, I won't have to worry about starving for the next year. Dr. Luo nodded repeatedly and then turned around to give him 20 taels of silver. Chungrue, thank you. You've really saved our family's life. You're welcome. You should cart it home as soon as possible to avoid any trouble. I understand. I'll have to trouble you to keep an eye on the clinic for the morning, then. After Dr. Luo finished speaking, he turned around and went home, getting help to bring the white potatoes along. In the afternoon, Jiyu Chungrue brought Ju-Ying to town and sent 500 pounds of grass noodles, 1,000 pounds of white sweet potatoes, and a can of butter to the restaurant. Finally, Jiyu Chungrue pulled another cart full of white potatoes to the clinic and distributed them to the clinic helpers. Except for Jiyu Chungshi, everyone received 200 pounds. Although it wasn't much, it was enough to last them through the winter if they were to pair it with some other food. On the other side, Ju-Ying stayed in the restaurant after delivering the food. Seeing that everyone was in good spirits and looked good except for losing some weight, she asked, Zhao Cheng, Li Sheng, how's the cooking that you've been teaching Qiu Yu and the others? Have they memorized the menu of our restaurant? Mistress, don't worry. They're all obedient, and they've all memorized all of our existing recipes. Although they don't have the ingredients to practice, they are the ones who make our 3 meals daily. The soup they make is even better than ours. Zhao Sheng reported with a smile. That's great. Although our restaurant is closed, you can't relax. Otherwise, you'll be out of practice when we open again. One more thing is to learn each other's skills, such as martial arts, reading, accounting, and so on. You're the first batch of people under me, and I'll put you in an important position in the future. However, you'll need to have the ability for me to do that. Ju-Ying paused and looked at Fang Qing, Jiyu Wen, and Jiyu Wu. Especially the 3 of you. You're still young and have a long way to go. Don't stop striving for a better future just because you have food and shelter now. At the very least, you guys must think of a way to protect yourselves right now. Don't worry, mistress. We will definitely work hard and not let you down, Fang Qing stated, puffing out his chest. The others chimed in. Ju-Ying nodded, and she asked, by the way, Zhao Cheng. One heard that some refugees had come to town. Did they cause any trouble? Chapter 312 Fight. When they first came, some of them weren't honest. They stole and robbed, but most were individual cases. After they were caught, the soldiers sent them directly to the mill, and the rest of the refugees became well-behaved. Besides that, we're still selling grass noodles here, and there's still some water in the town wells. Overall, the town is quite stable. That's great. Don't leak your wealth, you guys should keep a low profile. Don't worry, boss, we'll keep a low profile. Ju-Ying gave them a few more words of advice and checked on Qiu Yu's cooking. After she was done, she left the restaurant and walked around the streets. She found that besides a grocery store and Jiyu Chengru's clinic, only one official grain store was open with guarded soldiers. She entered the grocery store and found the items were limited. Other than soy sauce, vinegar, salt, baking powder, and alum, there was nothing else food-related. After walking around, she only bought some thick thread to make shoes and went to the clinic. When the sun was about to set, the couple and Jiyu Chungshi returned to the village. As soon as they entered the village, they were surrounded by a group of people who said, Dr. Jiyu, I heard that you bought all the sweet potatoes that the Jiyu family had just harvested. Is that true? Yes, but it's not really me who bought it, as I was just helping Dr. Luo and his workers at the clinic make the purchase. It's not even enough for all of them. At this point, Jiyu Chungrue asked, you guys we wanted to buy some too. We didn't expect. Yeah. There's a shortage of food everywhere now. It's really a worry. Indeed, it's not easy for anyone to survive this year, so it's better to protect yourself. After Jiyu Chungrue finished speaking, he pulled on the reins and continued, you guys go ahead, as we'll be going back now. When the crowd heard this, they immediately retreated. After muttering a few words of shame, they dispersed. A month passed in the blink of an eye, and the weather gradually turned cold. The village men began climbing the mountain to chop firewood, and at the same time, they were looking for good wood to supply the workshop. While the men were busy in the mountains, the women sat under the sun and made clothes or shoes. Of course, when they were bored, it was common for them to quarrel as they chatted. Therefore, the small group members changed daily, which was more lively than a TV drama series. As for Ju Ying, she got bored at home, so she also joined in and took it as a form of entertainment. She usually only listened and never talked. She never took the initiative to ask about other people's family matters, let alone talk about her family's problems, so her days were relatively uneventful. One day, while everyone was chatting happily, two people suddenly ran down from the mountain and shouted, "This is bad. They are fighting. Everyone, come and help." "Jiaxing, what are you shouting about? What do you mean that they are fighting? Who's fighting who?" Mrs. Bai immediately stood up and asked. "That's right. Don't panic and tell us the problem clearly. What's going on?" Sixth Aunt Jiu inquired. "Refugees. A lot of refugees suddenly appeared on the mountain. They said they came from the south. Didn't they say there was an epidemic in the south some time ago? We are not allowing them to enter our village because they do not appear to be healthy. Who would have expected that they would start fighting us?" Jiaxing gasped for breath and explained intermittently. "What? That's crossing the line. We can't let them enter the village. Hurry up and inform the village chief and the constable." Mrs. Bai immediately ordered. "Yes, go back home and call all the strong men to the foot of the mountain. We need to stop them from entering the village." Sixth Aunt Jiu agreed. As soon as Ju Ying heard this, she immediately stood up and ran home. First, she went to inform Sister Tian next door, and then she rushed to town with Zhuang. Chapter 313. Heading up the mountains. The first thing they had to do was make sure that the refugees on the mountain weren't diseased. It would be fine if they didn't bring any, but coming into the village was a dead no if they did. Of course, their possibility of carrying this new disease wasn't high. Otherwise, how could they have crossed the mountains and rivers to reach this place? However, they had to be prepared for any possibilities. Jiu Chungrue, who was discussing a prescription with Dr. Luo, was startled when he learned of her news. He immediately stood up and said, 111, go get a carriage from the back. Wait for me at the side door. I'll go with you. Dr. Luo declared, too. He said a few words to his apprentice, took his medicine kit, and went to the side door with Ju Ying. After Jiu Chungrue had secured the carriage, they quickly rushed to the village. When they arrived at the village, everyone had already gathered at the foot of the mountains, even soldiers were climbing up the mountains. Seeing this, Jiu Chungrue turned his head and said to Dr. Luo, "Dr. Luo, you wait at the foot of the mountains, and 111 go up with them. Be careful." Dr. Luo nodded. He knew very well that going up the mountain would only bring them trouble at his age. Jiu Chungrue nodded. After handing the horse reins over to Ju Ying, he immediately went into the carriage, took his medicine kit, and chased after the soldiers. When he reached the front, he realized that not only were the soldiers there but even Tian Jingzhong and the patriarch. He immediately stepped forward, took a deep breath, and said, "Village constable, uncle, try not to get into a conflict with them. I'll see if they are diseased or not." Tian Jingzhong smiled and patted his shoulder. "That's my intention. With you here, we can be at ease. Let's hurry up and head up." Jiu Chungrue nodded and followed them. After heading up the mountains, he finally saw the two parties confronting each other. On one side were a group of villagers led by Qian Jiaxi. On the other side were about 1,000 refugees in tattered clothes. Tian Jingzhong exclaimed, "Oh my, the number of people is enough to form a large village." He breathed a sigh of relief because medicinal herbs were in short supply in Qingshui town. If everyone were badly injured, it would be difficult to deal with the following treatments. After that, the group quickly trekked forward. When they arrived, Tian Jingzhong looked at Qian Jiaxi and asked, "Are you guys all right?" "Don't worry, my lord. We're fine, and we just suffered some beatings from wooden sticks. Besides, They are planning to settle down in our area, so they don't dare to cause too much trouble. Tian Jingzhong nodded and went forward. Who can understand our words? Send a representative over and we'll have a good talk. Me, someone said. A 6-foot-tall man raised his hand and stood up. At the same time, when the crowd behind them saw Jiyu Chengru's group of men, they immediately buzzed and murmured with excitement, some even cried with joy. From the looks and clothes of Jiyu Chengru's group, these refugees knew that although they had suffered from the drought, the situation wasn't serious. The refugees knew they could finally stop and take a rest. Tian Jingzhong waved at the big guy and asked, after he leaned over, "I'm the village constable of Qingshui town. Where did you come from? What kind of disaster did your hometown suffer?" "I'm Hu Chun, and I used to be a bodyguard. Our group came from the Hui province and passed through the Qi mountain." Hu Chun paused and explained, "When our hometown was flooded, we hid in the mountains. After that, because our refuge spot was far away and our village was destroyed, everyone from nearby villages decided to go up the mountains after some discussion." "Several villages? There must be many who didn't make it along the way, right?" Tian Jingzhong's eyes swept over everyone as he spoke with a heavy expression. "Right, only 1/3 of us are left." Hu Chun replied with a heavy nod. Chapter 314 Going Down the Mountains, Treating Illnesses. Are you all sure you want to stay in this area? Yes, it's too cold here. We'll probably die here in the cold wilderness if we don't go down the mountains now. Alright, just in case, I'll have to let the doctor check you all and ensure there's no disease before one can take you in. You can discuss it among yourselves. If you agree, then line up and wait for the doctor to examine you one by one. If you disagree, you can only go back into the mountains again." Hu Chun didn't feel anything was wrong when he heard this. Instead, he admired Tian Jingzhong very much, as only an official who took human lives seriously was a good one. Moreover, they had been in the mountains for nearly 3 months. Who knew if they were sick? It was a good opportunity to have a checkup done. Those who were sick could be diagnosed early, and those who weren't could have peace of mind. After a discussion with a few elders, everyone quickly lined up. Seeing this, Jiyu Chengru called out the 2 brothers, Chen Jiaxi and Chen Jiala. He took out 3 masks from the first aid kit that Zhu Ying had added extra padding to and put them on. Jiyu Chengru then asked the 2 brothers to use a pair of pliers to hold the cotton ball and disinfect the refugees' wrists while he took their pulses. Those with a cold sat on one side, while those with other illnesses sat on the other. Fortunately, no serious epidemic diseases were detected, but most suffered from a bad cold. Some were mild, while others were more serious. The serious ones had already gone delirious with a fever. After disinfecting his hand with medical alcohol, Jiyu Chengru told Tian Jingzhong about the situation. "They can go down the mountains but shouldn't stay with the others for now. We can only let them mix after their illnesses are over. Is the medicine in your clinic enough for them?" "It should be enough. If it isn't, we can only use folk prescriptions for the not-so-serious ones." "Alright, let's go down the mountains." After Tian Jingzhong finished speaking, he informed Hu Chun, and everyone was divided into 2 teams as they went down the mountain. However, they were not allowed to enter the village. They were instead asked to borrow a few large tents from the military camp and stay in an open space. As for the beds, Jiyu Chengru gathered batches of straw and sterilized them. The blankets were either taken from richer families or the military. They ate mainly the food they brought and the noodles they bought with their collective money. On the other end, after Jiyu Chengru went down the mountain, he took out the medicinal herbs in the house and asked the village chief to bring all the clay pots and medicine jars into the village. Dr. Luo directed everyone to start brewing the medicine. Meanwhile, he brought the blood of the most seriously ill person into the interspace and tested it. After confirming that it carried some virus, he immediately went to the clinic to get the medicine and change the prescription. It was already nighttime after his busy day. Zhu Ying looked at his tired face and said, "Hurry up and eat your dinner, then go to bed early." "No, I'm not clean. I'd better go into the interspace to clean my clothes and take a hot shower." Jiyu Chongrui shook his head. The flu was no joke, and he didn't want to infect her. That's true. Ju Ying closed the door and let go of Zhuang. Then, she took him into her interspace. After disinfecting his clothes, she threw them in the washing machine. She washed her hands, went out of her interspace, and brought in the dinner she had cooked. Finally, she used a pressure cooker to cook a pot of white fungus and lotus seed soup. After Jiyu Chongrui finished cleaning up, the white fungus and lotus seed soup was also ready. After the two of them had a comfortable meal, Ju Ying said, "You should go to bed early. I'll take care of the animals in the space." Chapter 3:15 Settling Down. 1. I'd better go out and sleep. They'll definitely come to me if there's an emergency at night. Alright, you go ahead and sleep first. Ju Ying sent him out and returned to her interspace to get busy. After she was done, she used the pressure cooker to boil another pot of beef soup. The next morning, the two ate beef noodles in the interspace. Jiyu Chongrui went out to work after he finished breakfast. As soon as Ju Ying finished washing the dishes, villagers began to visit one after another, mainly to inquire about the condition of the refugees. After Ju Ying heard this, to avoid causing panic, she only told them that the group of people had a serious case of the flu and asked them not to come if there was nothing important. After that, she didn't say anything else. This time, the villagers were obedient, and no one came to bother her again except for the village chief. 3 days later, the refugees' conditions improved. Those who were only mildly ill had mostly recovered and were under their care. Jiyu Chongrui only had to stay behind occasionally to prescribe medicine and treat their illnesses. 7 days later, all of them recovered except those who were seriously ill. Half a month later, all the refugees had completely recovered. Tian Jingzhong then found Hu Chun and the other refugees' elders and asked, "What are your plans? Do you want to return to your hometown after the flood, or do you want to live in Qingshui town for a longer time?" Hu Chun's eyes immediately lit up. Qingshui town, in Yunhe County, was a famous place. It could be said to be a transfer station for the Ming dynasty's river transportation. The prosperity of this place was great, and it would be best if they could stay. However, if they didn't have a house or land in this disastrous year, they wouldn't have a good time either. "Are there any suitable houses and lands for us?" he asked. "No, even if there are empty houses in the village, there are very few, and they are dilapidated. However, if you want to build houses, you may be granted land for housing in each village. As for the land, it's just a barren land. You can also buy land from the locals." Tian Jingzhong added. He paused for a moment and continued, "The tents are yours. Of course, if you're afraid of the cold, you can also live in the warehouse at the dock, where there are also a group of refugees from other places. As for job placements, you all know what the current year is like. I'm afraid it's only to help people carry water and cut wood. Can we discuss this? I'll give you a clear answer tomorrow." "All right. By the way, if you want to be distributed to different villages, you'll have to split up. Or you could form a village at the foot of the mountains. It's up to you." As soon as he finished speaking, an old man hurriedly asked, "Can we really form a village by ourselves? If outsiders like them were to be scattered and spread out in the various villages, they would be easily bullied. However, if they were to form a separate village, it would be different. Although they would suffer in the early stages, they could live a good life after 5 or 6 years. The key was that everyone would be more united after supporting each other along the way. Of course, but the land is barren." After Tian Jingzhong finished speaking, he pointed at the mountains and said, "Go southwest along the foot of the mountain, and there's a village there, and further west of the village is a large open space. However, there are a lot of rocks and thistles over there, and it's hard to clear them, so we haven't been able to distribute them." "I understand. Well, study it carefully and give you a reply tomorrow." The old man nodded. "All right, after you've discussed it, you can come to the village to find the village chief. He will take you to me." After Tian Jingzhong finished speaking, he turned and left. Chapter 3:16 Settling Down. 2. after Tian Jingzhong left, another old man, Hu Chun's uncle, asked, it seems like you all want to stay? Uncle, I want to stay. If we go back to that little mountain valley, we'll still have to start again anyway. The only good thing is the land we own, but who knows what it'll be like after the flood. But it's different here. This is the river transportation channel, and there are plenty of opportunities. As long as we work hard, we don't have to worry about being unable to settle down. Hu Chun gave his reasons. Indeed. The problem is that it's too far to go back, too. There's a drought in the north and floods in the south. But how long can we last with the silver in our hands? Most importantly, I'm afraid one can't work much with my old bones. The old man who spoke first sighed. Then let's go to the place Constable Tian mentioned first. If it really doesn't work out, we'll try to settle in a few other villages. Uncle Hu was dejected when he heard that. The group followed Tian Jingzhong's guidance and found the place he mentioned. To put it bluntly, it was a small valley surrounded on both sides by mountains in the southwest. The ground was as barren as Constable Tian had said, with many rocks and shrubs. However, the area was quite large, with an area of about 1,000 acres. It would definitely be enough for 1,000 people to live if it were developed. These people had grown up in the mountains, so they didn't mind. Instead, they felt a sense of closeness. They each found a stick and walked in to check around. They focused on the shrubs growing on the ground and the grass. If they could plant something, they would be able to stay no matter what they planted. 2 hours later, the group returned to their original spot. One of the old men took out a thorny branch and said, I have most of these plants over there. There's also grass and some wild vegetables. Same here. There are quite a few jujube trees on the southern hill, and they can be considered medicinal herbs. It's the same on our side. We also have many of these spiky things. There are more spiky shrubs on the West Mountains, and many of them. Hu Chun quipped in. If I'm not wrong, it's a type of flower, he added after a moment of hesitation. Flower? Yes, it looks like the moon rose, but it doesn't look like it at the same time. There are many fine thorns on the edges of the leaves. Hu Chun stated as he returned his gaze to the branch. Let's go back and ask. If this is valuable, let's change our plan to planting flowers. It just so happens that old Lin here has worked in a rich family's flower garden before. Sure, let's ask Dr. Ji Yu then. He's a doctor, and he might recognize this thing. Hu Chun said. Let's go. After that, the group returned to the village. Hu Chun found the Ji Yu family house after some time. However, as soon as he reached the door, he immediately retreated when he heard a dog barking. Ji Yu Chungrui, who was squeezing pickled vegetables with Ju Ying in the courtyard, looked up and was stunned when he saw him. He went up to Zhuang and held him, saying, Brother Hu, you're here. Let's talk inside. It's okay, it's just a matter of a few words. I won't go in and disturb you. Hu Chun glanced at Ju Ying, who was busy, and shook his head. Ji Yu Chungrui had no choice but to walk out. Hu Chun directly handed the branch to him and said, Dr. Ji Yu, do you know what this is? Ji Yu Chungrui took it and observed it carefully before saying, This is a type of wild rose. Where did you pick it from? Hu Chun didn't hide anything after hearing this. He told him everything that had happened since Tian Jingzhong came to find them. He asked, Have you seen this flower before? Can it be sold for money? Chapter 317 Settling Down. 3. You probably can't sell it as a flower, but a wild rose is also a medicinal herb. First, it could heal wounds and eliminate fatigue. Secondly, it had the effect of regulating body temperature and replenishing blood. It could also play a role in maintaining beauty. Third, it can regulate meridians and relieve pain. It also improves your bladder and reduces gastrointestinal diseases. It has a good effect on relieving constipation. The most important thing is that it can be drunk as a tea, just like chrysanthemums. Tea. Hu Chun's eyes lit up upon hearing this. It was said that chrysanthemums were considered high-class tea. Although this rose tea wasn't as expensive, it was much better than farming crops. Thinking of this, he got a little excited. Dr. Ji-yu, please don't tell anyone about this, he pleaded. Ji-yu Chung-rui was stunned for a moment before he knew what he was thinking. He said, sure, but if you want to sell these roses at a high price, you have to farm at scale like chrysanthemums. So after you settle down, it's best to work together with the others. Otherwise, you won't be able to defend your secret and develop well. When Hu Chun heard him say this, he nodded repeatedly and replied, I understand. Thank you for your reminder. We won't hide anything deliberately. Okay. One can buy them from you if you can't farm much early on. I'll also tell you how to process it. Thank you so much. I'll head back for now. Hu Chun bowed before turning around and running down the mountain. After Ji-yu Chung-rui saw him off, he turned around and washed his hands. He then continued squeezing pickled vegetables together with Ju Ying. At the same time, he said, this is their destiny. We've been walking around the mountains for so long and didn't even see a patch of wild roses. That's right. But it's good that they're planning on planting it. We can just go over and collect them, which will save us a lot of trouble. You're right. Ji-yu Chung-rui agreed, and the two of them got busy. On the other end, after Hu Chun returned, he found a few elders and explained the use of wild roses to them. What do you guys think? Regardless, one want to stay. If that's the case, then we'll stay. Uncle Hu agreed. The others also echoed one after another. After that, they asked for everyone's opinion. Of course, he didn't tell them about the wild rose. Otherwise, they wouldn't know if the news would spread, and they would have no specialty in the local area. Everyone naturally agreed, as this was much better than staying in a small mountain village. So, the next morning, they found Tian Jingzhong through the village chief and told him about their settlement. Tian Jingzhong was a little surprised after hearing this. After all, that place was really barren, so he asked again, are you sure? We're sure. We've gone to take a look. Although the land is a little barren, it can be farmed. It's just a little more difficult to get started. There are also many jujube trees on the mountain to the south. We can earn some silver by taking care of them. All right, since you've decided, come with me to the county office and settle the procedures for forming a village, said Tian Jingzhong. By the way, you'll have to decide who will be the village chief. The elders pointed at Hu Chun. Firstly, he could communicate with the locals normally. Another reason was that he had been a good leader and had a good reputation. In addition, he was young and daring. With him leading the group, they wouldn't be afraid of a lack of decision-making in the future. Hu Chun was stunned for a moment, but he didn't decline. He nodded directly. Tian Jingzhong smiled and patted his shoulder. Kiddo, it seems like you're pretty popular here. Are you literate? Although a village chief's position isn't that high up the ranks, you'll still need to write documents to convey reports to the higher-ups. Chapter 318 Marriage. I'm not too good at it, but I've studied for a few years. However, after one passed the exam, my family was too poor, so I changed to practicing martial arts and became an armed bodyguard. No wonder you could speak your words clearly. Then it's settled. I'll change my clothes, and well set off. After Tian Jingzhong finished speaking, he turned and returned to his inner room. The village chief turned his head. Congratulations, Brother Hu. Our two villages are quite close to each other, so we'll have to look out for each other in the future. I don't deserve to be called brother. I'll call you Uncle Chen. Please take care of me in the future, Uncle Chen. Haha, don't mind if I accept being your elder, then. If you need any help in the future, don't hesitate to ask. I'll definitely help if I can. At this time, Tian Jingzhong changed into clean clothes and came out. The few of them exchanged a few polite words and then parted ways. Early the next morning, Hu Chun and the others got busy. A group of strong laborers took their hatchets and began to clear the barren land. The village layout was formed into an L shape, almost entirely wrapping the rose garden. After the weeds were cleared out, it was time to dig a well. The elderly went to town to find a cloth shop and bought some cloth to make cotton-padded clothes for the winter. At the same time, The news that Hu Chun had become the village chief as a young man had gradually spread in the village. Just as Ju Ying was about to have dinner that night, Father Ji Yu came in looking disheveled. His face appeared to have been scratched several times. Ji Yu Chungrui was stunned for a moment. Please treat my wound first. Father Ji Yu requested in embarrassment. Sit down and wait for a moment. Ji Yu Chungrui didn't ask further. But when he turned around, he almost laughed out loud. To be honest, even when their family was escorted back here, Father Ji Yu had never been in such a sorry state, even when his pride was wounded. Ji Yu Chungrui never thought his father would be this badly scratched one day. Without even thinking, he knew it was most likely Mrs. Liu's doing, but he didn't know why. At the same time, he was secretly smirking. In the past, Father Ji Yu always treasured her and her kids. He even made Ji Yu Chungrui and Ju Ying leave the family with nothing but the clothes on their backs to please Mrs. Liu. He was getting his retribution, and he deserved it. Ju Ying just lightly greeted him before returning to the kitchen. She put away the steamed sea bass she had prepared and made a small pot of cooked pork with cabbage and vermicelli. She served them with a plate of sweet and sour radish, 3 salted duck eggs, and 6 black steamed buns. When she returned to the dining room, Ji Yu Chungrui had already treated his wound. Ju Ying placed the dishes on the table and said, "Father, sit down, and let's have a meal." Yes, do take a seat and eat with us." Ji Yu Chungrui nodded and even brought him a stool. Father Ji Yu wanted to refuse at first. After all, no family is well off these days. But thinking of the crazy Mrs. Liu and smelling the lovely food before him, he finally nodded. Don't mind if I do." He picked up his chopsticks and found some vermicelli inside. He asked, "Is this vermicelli? It doesn't look like it." "This is vermicelli but made with white potato flour. It has a different flavor. Try it," Ji Yu Chungrui said. Father Gus' interest was piqued when he heard it was made from white sweet potatoes. To be honest, he was getting tired of eating potatoes every day. It would be best if he could have a change of flavor. He picked up some vermicelli with his chopsticks and ate it. He nodded and said, not bad at all. It's bouncy and soft and more delicious than regular vermicelli. When it's soaked in meat juice, it doesn't taste inferior to actual meat. If you like it, eat more. There's such a big pot. There are steamed buns over here if you think it's too salty." Ji Yu Chungrui handed him a black steamed bun after that. "Oh, you guys go ahead and eat too. Don't mind me. I won't hesitate to try them." After Father Ji Yu finished speaking, he lowered his head and started eating. Chapter 319 Disciplining the Daughter-in-Law. After the meal, Ju Ying made them a pot of tea and went to the kitchen to wash the dishes. "You've been in contact with the refugees for quite some time. What do you think of Hu Chun?" Father Ji Yu asked. "In what aspect?" Ji Yu Chungrui asked, surprised by the sudden question. "Both. Tell me the details." "He's not bad. He's bold but meticulous, aggressive, and knows when to advance and when to retreat. Phi also has a wide range of knowledge. He's handsome and tall and looks like a good man at the moment." When Ji Yu Chungrui said this, he thought of the wound on his father's face and asked, "You can't be thinking of marrying my 5th sister to him, right?" One did have this idea, but Mrs. Liu disdained their family for being poor and didn't agree to this marriage. She didn't even consider our family's current status as criminals. As long as the groom's family's condition is decent, how many would be willing to marry her? Ji Yu Chungrui looked at him in surprise. To be honest, he was pretty impressed with his line of thought. Hu Chun was skilled in both literature and martial arts. If he had the chance, he would definitely be able to achieve something. "What do the other people in the family think?" he asked. "Your grandma and your second uncle both agree with me. Chengji and Chengye didn't object, either. It's just that Mrs. Liu refused to agree no matter what and insisted that I wanted to harm Zishan. She's my biological daughter, so why would I?" When Father Ji Yu said this, he remembered how he had kicked the couple out of the house and suddenly reddened. Ji Yu Chungrui understood what he meant. However, The damage had already been done, and he didn't want to hear his repentance. Hence, he changed the topic. What about Zishan? Doesn't this depend on her opinion? What does she know? As long as we adults make the decision, it's fine. It's a major event in her life. It's better to ask her about it so there won't be a knot in her heart in the future. That's true. I'll ask her for her opinion later. Father Gu nodded. After chatting for a while, the sky outside got completely dark. After Father Gu asked about how to make the vermicelli, he got up and went home. After Ju Ying learned the whole story, she shook her head and said, "What a huge difference between a child with a mother and a child without one. I feel so sorry for our original selves." Indeed, in ancient times, although it was said that the mother would be prosperous because of their son, in most cases, it's the other way around. But this has nothing to do with us. Well, try not to get involved in the matters over there and just focus on living our own lives. On the other side, after Father Gu returned home, he saw the crowd waiting for him to eat and Mrs. Liu kneeling on the ground. He was stunned for a moment before saying, "You guys can start eating. I've already eaten at Chengru's place. You've sure become capable, even learning how to find a meal outside, huh?" Mrs. Liu got up and angrily said this as she moved the dining table. "Kneeling for just 2 hours seems useless. Do you want to kneel for another 2 hours? Madame Chiao chimed in with a strange tone. "Mother," everyone was waiting for him, but Mrs. Liu immediately lowered her head and replied. Madame Chiao, however, knocked the ground with her walking stick and interrupted her halfway through. After that, she firmly demanded, "Why aren't you listening to me anymore? Are you planning to rebel? Or do you think you can be arrogant after becoming the main wife? Do you want to be demoted back to being a concubine and experience what it means to have someone above you again?" Jiyu Changye immediately turned to his father for help. However, Father Jiyu ignored him. It was only suitable for a mother-in-law to teach her daughter-in-law. There was no need for him to stop her. What's more, Ms. Liu was getting more and more arrogant. She even dared to get physical with him. For Jiyu Chengye's sake, it was already good enough that he didn't personally deal with her. Thus, why would he stop his mother from venting her anger on his behalf? He wanted Mrs. Liu to learn a good lesson this time and let her know what it meant to regard her husband as the central pillar of the family. Chapter 320 Seeking Opinions. Mrs. Liu's heart skipped a beat when she heard this. In these 2 years, she had been bugging Mrs. Guo a lot. Her life would be difficult if she were demoted to a concubine. At the thought of this, she quickly kneeled and apologized. "Mother, one only muddled because of Zishan's marriage. Don't take it to heart. I won't dare do it again." Jiyu Zishan immediately went forward and shook Madame Chiao's arm, acting coquettishly. "Grandma, for the sake of your granddaughter, please give my mother another chance." "That's right. Grandma, please give my mother another chance. She definitely won't dare do it again." Jiyu Chengye quickly echoed. Seeing this, Madame Chiao snorted coldly and said, "For the sake of the 2 children, I will give you one last chance. If you do it again, you can return to being a concubine. Maybe when your status is lower, you'll be able to see better." "No, I definitely won't do this again." Mrs. Liu hurriedly nodded. As the saying goes, it's easy to avoid the death penalty, but it's hard to escape punishment. You'll switch places with Mrs. Guo and cook a month's worth of meals as a punishment. Even if Mrs. Liu was internally unhappy, she nodded and said, "One will remember this." Quickly set the table. When Mrs. Liu heard this, she immediately turned around and went out. The others had seen enough of the show and immediately followed to prepare the dishes. "Son, the wound on your face won't leave a scar, right?" Madame Chiao looked at Father Jiyu. "It's fine." Chungrue said that the wound wasn't deep. "After it's healed, it'll be fine after applying a month's worth of scar removal cream." "That's good." "She's really too much, getting more and more outrageous. You can't spoil her anymore." "I know." When Father Jiyu said this, he told her about the vermicelli. "Mother, brother, I'm thinking of using a portion of the white sweet potato to make vermicelli or turn it into dry powder. Those two things can be dried and stored for a long time. One heard it wouldn't be a problem to keep them for 2 or 3 years. What do you think? After that, he briefly explained how to make vermicelli from white sweet potatoes. You two brothers can discuss it. I'll go and eat dinner. Madame Chiao got up and sat at the dining table. Second Uncle Jiyu hesitated for a moment before saying, Brother, from what you've said, if we were to turn white sweet potatoes into vermicelli, some parts might be wasted. Let's take out 500 pounds of white sweet potatoes and try it out before anything. All right, let's give it a try. After the meal, Father Jiyu called Jiyu Chungye and Jiyu Zishan to the study room. Now that there are no outsiders, you can tell me what you think of Hu Chun. Is there a need for this marriage? If there isn't, I won't waste my breath anymore. I think Hu Chun is a good person. As long as nothing unexpected happens, his future will be fine. However, one heard he has a pair of younger siblings, and their family conditions are poor now. So, it all depends on what Zishan thinks. If she would be willing to go through 2 years of suffering together and bet on a good man for a good life, she should marry him. Otherwise, it isn't like she doesn't have another choice. Father Jiyu looked at Jiyu Zishan and asked, Zishan, what about you? What do you think? But one must make it clear in advance, don't be too ambitious. Our family's situation isn't really better compared to an ordinary farmer's. At most, you can get married to a son from a rich family like Ziki's husband, who doesn't have great ambitions. When Jiyu Zishan said this, she raised her head and hesitated, asking, Father, is Hu Chun really as good as you say? He's better than the other villagers anyway. At least he's literate and skilled in martial arts. He's also in charge of about 1,000 people now. Father Jiyu said. As for Hu Chun's character, he had already repeated it more than 10 times and was too lazy to say more. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.